This is Special Prosecutor Larry Cliven.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth, for competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty, for the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meatpackers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Cliven, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Cliven. Some really big events occurred this week. Maybe the biggest in my career, in addition to enjoining the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on the American people. There have been many victories, but as I say in my new book, it takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. I barely scratched the surface. And that's why we, the American people, need to rise up. We need to fight the tyrannical deep state. We need to fight the corrupt clowns, the court jesters on Capitol Hill that are stuffing money into their pockets for self-aggrandizement. We need to address the problem, the rot, the corruption in our federal judiciary that Jefferson predicted as unelected jurists thinking they're there for life who have become despots. But you know what? There's a ray of hope because just last Thursday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit of all courts, perhaps next to the D.C. Circuit, the most left-leaning court in the land. I would say the D.C. Circuit even is more left-leaning. But this court, located in San Francisco, California, affirmed the dismissal of the indictment against Cliven Bundy, his sons, and another peaceful protester, Ryan Payne, and in effect ruled that the prosecutorial abuse of Justice Department lawyers was unprecedented, was so great that even an Obama-appointed judge, Gloria Navarro, who had done everything she could to violate the constitutional rights of the Bundys and the other defendants, had to dismiss this case. And it was a judge that I've tangled with in the past, Judge Jay Bybee, who kept me out of the lower court case. I had to be there in an advisory capacity and bringing other litigation on behalf of Cliven Bundy, some of which really bore fruit because we got documents showing just how corrupt this prosecution was, and we used those in the appeal. But we won the appeal, and the court sustained the dismissal of the indictment. This is one of the biggest events in the history of legal jurisprudence in the United States because the prosecutorial abuse was so great that even someone like Cliven, who unfairly has been made a lightning rod because he stood up to the government, a corrupt federal government that tried to take over his property, that tried to drive him off the land. Former corrupt Senator Harry Reid, who reportedly was trying to sell the land out from under the Bundys to the communist Chinese, to their environmental interests, probably getting kickbacks with his son Rory, a downtown Las Vegas lawyer. That the fact that we won actually has to be a sign from God. And as Cliven would call him, the Heavenly Father. We are now going to pursue other action. I have pending a complaint at the Trump Justice Department against these prosecutors, Stephen Myre, Daniel Schiess, Nadia Ahmed, Daniel Bogdan, former U.S. attorney, for violating the constitutional rights of my clients, for lying to the court, for hiding evidence, for threatening witnesses who wanted to come forward, whistleblowers like Larry Wooten, who said there was a kill list on the heads of the Bundys and they were being disparaged, their Mormon faith, as subhuman by Bureau of Land Management agents. There were sharpshooters at the ranch to threaten the lives of the Bundys. Their cattle was killed and buried in a secret mass grave. Cliven's sister Margaret was assaulted and thrown to the ground. His sons, one of them, Dave, had his face ground into the ground by a federal agent. They had mercenaries there. And they were celebrating during this entire thing. After this was over, Carol Bundy found liquor bottles all over the place and shotgun shells. In any event, this is a very important matter. So now the burden falls upon Attorney General Bill Barr, who's done nothing up to this point in time to protect the American people other than to scratch the backs of Washington insiders like General Mike Flynn. And frankly, he deserved at least to try to have his indictment dismissed. It hasn't happened yet. It's going through the very politicized and leftist D.C. circuit right now, the appellate court in Washington, D.C., and, other things that have happened. But Barr has really taken no action. Comey hasn't been prosecuted. Clapper, Brennan, the Obamas, the Bidens, they're off limits, according to Barr. And Barr allowed his prosecutors to take an appeal here. Actually, it was during sessions, but he allowed it to continue because I asked him to have it withdrawn. And this has been confirmed because in a 58-page single-space decision, even a judge who has not been favorably disposed to me by the name of Jay Bybee, who had heretofore had little respect for constitutional rights of individuals, or a number of cases, I don't need to get into them here, upheld the constitutional rights of Cliven Bundy. Even he had to do that. He wrote the majority opinion. So this is a landmark victory in the history of individuals standing up to a tyrannical federal government. It was Thomas Jefferson who said that when the people fear the government, there's tyranny. But when the government fears the people, there's liberty. Well, there's a shining light of potential liberty here in light of all that's going on, whether it's COVID-19 that's destroying this country or whether it's the radical left that are occupying the streets and looting and burning and maiming and killing. And it's whether it's mayors like the Portland mayor who just said last week that these violent leftists should stop attacking the police station, not because they were committing crimes, not because what they were doing was improper, but because it's going to help Trump get reelected. This tells you what you're up against. The radical left. The radical left wants to destroy this country, not just the Bundys. The Bundys stood up to them and they won so far, but we're going to be fighting them in the future, I can assure you. The Center for Biological Diversity, radical funded group by Soros, still wants to have the Bundys removed from that property. They're hateful. They are despicable. It's a group, just like Soros himself, that would sell their own mother to the devil to accomplish their purpose. And in fact, Soros did with his father. He confiscated the property of Jews going to their death in World War II in Nazi Germany so he could save his own skin. He admitted to that on 60 Minutes and refused to say that he was even sorry for that. So this is what we're up against. And that's why I ask that you join Freedom Watch's Justice League. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. See if you qualify for our class action against the communist Chinese, because even our own government, even President Trump's taking no action with regard to this damage. Our case against the Philadelphia mayor, the DA, the two police chiefs who have discriminated, particularly against white policemen, because it's politically convenient to do that. It helps get them votes and gets them reelected. We have a reverse discrimination lawsuit there. Support that. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and please go out and order a pre-order copy of my book and then order it when it comes out. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. Forget Sean Hannity. Okay, that's entertainment. He tells you stuff that's never going to happen to get you to come back. But you're smart enough now to know that our current Attorney General and the Justice Department is not going to do anything. We know that. If they would have done it, they would have done it by now. They're not going to hold Comey accountable, Clapper, Brennan, Obamas, the Bidens, nobody, because you know what happens in Washington? Because of the deep state, because of the mass surveillance, there's blowback. And if they go too hard against their adversaries will use the same powers against them when they're in office. And that's the story here. So therefore, you have someone like Cliven Bundy, like Ryan Bundy, like Ammon Bundy, like Dave, like Mel Bundy, like the peaceful protesters who stood up for their rights. They didn't ask anybody else to do it for them. They did it for themselves. They fought the so-called law, and they won. The land that the Bundys occupied is their land. My land is our land. That's the motto of Israel as well, of Jews and Christians. This is our land, and we will fight to the death to preserve that. And the Bundys put their lives on the line, and they won, and they were not afraid. They never gave in. Even towards the end of the case, the prosecution saw it was losing, and they said to Cliven, accept time served and we'll let you off. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. I want to be acquitted. And instead, the indictment was dismissed, and then it went up on appeal. But these are such brave people. And I remember coming out of the courthouse after that indictment was dismissed, and Cliven looked upward to the sky, and he said, Heavenly Father, thank you. And it was raining. And then he looked at me and he said, Larry, this is a good sign. It doesn't rain that much out here. You know, it's very dry at Bunkerville, at the ranch. And it was the Heavenly Father that intervened. It was God. It was his son, Jesus, that bailed the Bundys out. And he will bail us out again, too. And so will his son. But we have to do it for ourselves. He will be with us every step of the way, just like he was the ancient Israelites and Moses and King David and Jesus himself, the Son of God. But we have to take action ourselves. We can't sit there and do nothing. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, sign up for our citizens' class actions, sign up for our citizens' grand juries, where we're going to bring justice ourselves. We've already indicted Mueller. We're going to try him when this coronavirus subsides. We're going to indict Clapper, Brennan, the whole lot of them, Obama's, Clinton's, Biden. We don't have a government anymore. We do not have a government that represents the people. And it doesn't even support the president of the United States. He's out there by himself. That's it. So we're going to be back with the second segment, but give that some thought and go to freedomwatchusa.org and go to amazon.com or barnesandnoble.com or another bookseller on the internet and get a pre-ordered copy of my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. I don't have Fox News to sell it for me. I have to sell it myself, but not because it's going to make me money. It probably won't make me anything. But you need to see how we can save this country, and I gave it a lot of thought. I'll be right back.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Cliven.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
What are the two most important issues today? Number one, there's COVID-19, the coronavirus, where the American people really don't understand what's happening. Different messages are coming out of the Trump White House every single day. Dr. Fauci, makes statements that he then retracts, and he has new statements. And then we have his assistant come out there saying that it's going to engulf the entire country. And at the same time, the United States, that is our so-called Justice Department, is taking no action with regard to the damage that's been done. Trillions and trillions and trillions of taxpayer money has gone out to subsidize those who are losing their jobs, those who are losing their businesses, those who are losing their lives, their loved ones. And yet, the communist Chinese sit there in Beijing laughing at us, saying, how weak can those Americans be? We have unleashed what is likely a bioweapon, either accidentally or by design. I'm not so sure it was accidental. I think they did it by design. They have so many people over there. They have billions of people. They don't care if they lose several 100,000. It doesn't bother them at all. In fact, for many years, they wouldn't allow for female babies to be born. They would kill them because they wanted to limit the population. These are the people that run this country. The Chinese people are good people. You know, of the people who signed up for our class action in Dallas, Texas, about 30% are Chinese American or Asian American. And they've been persecuted for many, many years. Many of them came from communist China to escape the persecution, just like my relatives came from the Soviet Union to escape persecution, and Poland and Lithuania. It was all in the Soviet bloc. But that leadership over there is pure evil. And what really disappoints me is that President Trump, as much as I support him personally, I don't say who to vote for as head of Freedom Watch, but I support him personally, I will vote for him. Doesn't take any action. And why is that? Because another one of my brave clients, and you're going to hear from Cliven Bundy later on in this show to talk about the victory that we scored yesterday, Judy Mikovits, has revealed that Dr. Fauci was responsible for sending over the seeds of the COVID-19 virus to that communist Chinese lab in Wuhan, China, to do research because it couldn't legally be done at the Fort Detrick Institute of Virology, which is the military's lab. We study viruses because we're trying to fight off possible bioweapons attacks and otherwise. And in fact, we create bioweapons ourselves. Every country in the world has them. They're illegal, but we create them. And that's something that we need to keep in mind because we sowed the seeds, perhaps, of our own destruction. And that may be why the president is not moving against China, because he's been briefed on that, occurred during another administration. So it's very important that you join our class action in Dallas. It's very important that you support our criminal case in The Hague against the Chinese leadership. It's very important that you support our Justice League and become part of it, because we don't have a Justice Department anymore. And you can see that when you listen to Cliven in the next segment. If we have one, it's frankly, it's just evil. And I'm an alumnus, and I'm disgusted. And that's why I wrote this book. It takes a revolution. It's been in me. I wrote it in a month and a half. It's about 230, 240 pages with, the foreword and everything else. And that's a very fast time to write a book. But it was there, and it was screaming to come out. And I also wrote, all my columns that I do for WorldNet Daily and otherwise. I also have a 4-volume work, Essays of a Mad Man, not Madman, but Mad Man, which you can get if you go to freedomwatchusa.org. But the American people need to be educated, and we need to rise up and wage a second American peaceful revolution. And that's why I want you to read it. It was the printing press, as I've said many times, in the days leading up to our first revolution in 1776, that's when it began, that coalesced the American colonies. The American people need to be educated. They need to know what they're up against. They're beginning to get an idea, but they need to hear it even more. And they need to know that we're in a war. We're in a war against the left, a war that's going to result in one side winning and the other side losing. And it better be our side that wins, because if we don't win, this country's going under. And it's already hanging by a thread. We see the radical leftists in the streets, killing and maiming and looting and burning, with mayors saying, I don't really care. I just care whether Trump is defeated, leftist mayors. And this is what we're up against. I'll be right back with Cliven Bundy.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Cliven.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm back with my very good friend, my client, one of the bravest Americans, frankly, in this country's history. His name is Cliven Bundy. He and his sons, Ammon, Ryan, Dave, and Mel, and peaceful protesters stood down a tyrannical federal government with a standoff that resulted in our following the law, and they're not. And in fact, yesterday, after the indictment had been thrown out by a judge, Gloria Navarro, who was no friend of the Bundys and no friend of mine, it was forced to be thrown out because the prosecutors and the federal government had conducted so much prosecutorial abuse and frankly committed crimes against the Bundys by withholding exculpatory evidence, that's called Brady material, by lying to the court, by having a kill list, if you can believe this. We learned that from the whistleblower, Larry Wooten, on the heads of the Bundys, making disparaging statements about their faith. I can go on and on and on. There were assaults, cattle were killed, buried in a secret mass grave. It was one of the greatest abuses, if not the greatest abuse, of federal government power, tyrannical power in the history of this country. After all of that, the Trump Justice Department took an appeal, if you can believe that, and we won. We fought the so-called law. Of course, it wasn't law. They're outlaws. And we won. And a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which ordinarily wouldn't favor people like the Bundys or even Larry Klayman, their lawyer, ruled in our favor in a stunning 58-page decision, which excoriated the prosecutorial misconduct of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Nevada and also the federal government at large. I bring in Cliven Bundy now. I want to get your reaction to this, Cliven. It was a great victory. It's a great victory not just for you and your family, who I've become an honorary member, I hope, but the entire American people. And so I wanted to get your reaction, and I wanted to bring you on today because this is a really big moment in legal history.
Thank you, Larry. And, I have to thank American people in general. We're in a hard time. And one of the worst things that's going on here is our justice system. And I have been able to witness the I don't know how to say it besides the rottenness and the crookedness of our own government. And yesterday was a victory. The Ninth Circuit said this thing was as corrupt as I'm talking about, and they wrote a 58-page document stating how corrupt it was. And so this thing is in the open to the world to see. I hope that somehow we can make a better America than we got right now. I get up early this morning and baled hay here on the ranch, and of course I was up before daylight for several hours and baled hay. I couldn't help but feel some happiness and thankfulness that we have worked for many years, 30 plus years probably, to get to this point. And Larry, I want to thank you for where we stand today.
Well, I thank you. It's my great privilege to represent you, Cliven, and in other matters, your sons as well. I felt a tremendous pride. I've been out to your ranch. Unbelievably beautiful place, about 400,000 acres in and around Lake Mead. And this land is your land. Your family started to ranch it with your grandfather over 150 years ago. You made improvements to the land. You continue to do that. You treat it like it's your little baby. Yet the Bureau of Land Management came in, claimed federal jurisdiction, and tried to remove you from your land. And not only that, assaulted your sister Margaret, killed the bulls in your herd, buried them in a secret mass grave, threatened your lives, surrounded you with sharpshooters. And that's one of the big reasons the indictment was dismissed, because the prosecutors lied about that. Prosecutors came out to your ranch actually before anything ever happened. This is the U.S. Attorney's Office, Daniel Bogdan, the U.S. Attorney, the number one assistant U.S. Attorney, Stephen Myray, and the second in command, Daniel Sheese, and the third, Nidia Ahmed. They came out there and they tried to set you up with an entrapment to try to get you to commit a crime, and you wouldn't. You weren't even armed. You were peaceful. So where we stand right now is that you got justice in the end. You suffered unbelievably, you and your family. You were in prison for 2 years. First, you were thrown in solitary confinement. You were denied right of counsel. You were denied a speedy trial. And then your constitutional rights were violated, as were the others who were indicted, the peaceful protesters. In fact, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is not very far right, if at all, said that the prosecutors had a friend in Judge Gloria Navarro. And she had to dismiss this basically to save her own skin, because she was going down with a sinking ship when it turned out that these prosecutors had lied to her and hidden evidence. But in terms of what's going on right now, what's your feeling about what the Justice Department did? I mean, to me, it's become the Department of Injustice, and we have pending, which have never been acted upon, complaints with the Office of Professional Responsibility Inspector General. And I'm going to give them a copy of this decision and demand that, they investigate this matter thoroughly and discipline these lawyers. These lawyers, in my view, should be removed from the Department of Justice. And Frankly, I think they should lose their licenses, and that's at a minimum. What's your thoughts on it?
Well, there's two things I'm seeing here. The Department of Interior and, the BLM, the Park Service, these people, they come to my ranch and brought an army. There was like 213 federal officers armed with assault rifles attacked my family and my ranch. That's one thing. It's so terrible that we got bureaucrats and they have armies. But then the other thing is the Justice Department. These people indicted me and my family and my other supporters with 17 false lies in indictment. And then they just carried this on and on and on. Like they said, like you said, they actually come to my ranch and planned, this whole thing before it ever happened. That's how crooked and rotten it is. And then, of course, it's been a total blessing that we was able to survive all of this after almost 5 years of indictments and jail and appeals. And in fact, yesterday we did have a great victory.
Well, it's not just you. The American people have to look at this and say, hey, it can happen to me too. And we see it happening in the streets today. We see the lawlessness. We see the fact that state governors and mayors do not respect the law. They're using it not just to destroy the country, but destroy the president of the United States, to bring him down. And it goes far beyond what happened to you, but yours is the worst example I have ever seen of such force. Tell us a little bit about why the land does not belong to the federal government. They shouldn't have been there in the first place, Cliven.
Well, I guess we probably could talk about my 15-second defense. I have claimed for years I have a 15-second defense, and that is that I graze my cattle only on Clark County, Nevada land, and I have no contract with the federal government. And so, as far as I'm concerned, the federal government had no party in this issue. The federal government don't have a party, and the federal court don't have a party. We go back into the history of my family, like 150 years ago, we pioneered into this country and created preemptive rights, things like livestock water rights, forage rights. We improved this land. In fact, my family, they're the ones that pioneered the roads through this country for the first horse and wagons, and they have been building roads and improvements on this land for several generations now. But the main thing is constitutionally, the federal government cannot own land. And they claim that they own over 50% of the western lands, and that isn't constitutional at all.
Well, and that's something that needs to be pursued. We need to take that to the Supreme Court ultimately. Somebody needs to do something. The president, hopefully he'll be reelected, needs to do something about it. He's been supportive of the Bundy family and the ranchers out west, although inexplicably he doesn't seem to be in control of his Justice Department, because it was his Justice Department that allowed this corrupt U.S. attorney in Nevada to take an appeal and put you through it yet again. You've been living with uncertainty, a lot of emotional distress. And going forward, we have individuals that we have to fend off too, and groups, radical environmentalists and others who just have a hatred for anybody who wants to assert their rights, their grazing rights, their water rights. They think they own the land. And their pretext was over a desert tortoise. I remember he told me once that there's no shortage of desert tortoises. They even have desert tortoise farms. They have to euthanize them. That's how many there are. So this whole thing's been a sham, but I don't want people to think it's over, because the Bundy family still needs your prayers and your support, because the radical leftists, will be coming back. It's a little bit like Darth Vader in Star Wars. Do you agree?
Well, one thing that's interesting, and I'll bring out 2 points again, is these bureaucrats, and there's a lot of them, all these different federal agencies, now they have a standing army. And the other thing that's happened, and, you hear the word take away the money from the police forces and stuff. Well, what people are actually saying is we're tired of the federal government paying for this abuse and, this defund of the police. Well, that sounds pretty bad, but when you stop and think that the federal government has the biggest police force, back in Obama's time, he said that we'll have a big, more of a national police force or a national army. That's already been created. We have, the Bureau of Land Management, the Park Service, Fish and Wildlife, EPA. Everybody has their own army now. The Indian Bureau. We got a big army that's not constitutional. It's not we the people at all. It's a big machine that we can't live with, and I don't know what we're going to do about it.
Well, you're right. I wasn't talking about the federal deep state and their henchmen, their police force. I was talking about local police that defend people. And in fact, you've asked the sheriff in Clark County to protect you if people tried to attack your family, did attack your family, ever come back from the federal government. And we went to see the sheriff, Lombardo, right after the indictment was thrown out. Of course, he wouldn't meet with us. So you're right. It's hard to say what you're paying for out there in Clark County. It's absolutely true. But this whole situation is something which will continue on. We have to clear up the fact that the federal government does not own this land. How can you be a state when the federal government claims to own 87% of Nevada? I mean, that's just common sense. So, Clive, let's give a few final words here, because I know the people love you. My supporters love you. I love your family. And we're very thankful for what you did, not just for yourselves, but for all of the American people.
Well, I have to thank you, and I have to thank American people. They have supported me and, give us a lot of backing, and I think we can say we have seen some justice here. Yesterday, I think that was sort of a final step in the justice. But the problem of it is we've seen many years of injustice. We still have people like those prosecuting attorneys. They were liars, and they.
Ivan, hold on. We're going to come back into the next segment here. We'll take about 3 minutes so you can continue your thought. We'll be right back with Cliven Bundy.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Cliven.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow patriots and Americans, Cliven Bundy has a few more words to say, and they're very important. Listen to them carefully. That's the verdict. Go ahead, Cliven.
Well, I have a warning, I guess, for American people. We've got to do something with this government and overreach of the government. We got to do with it something to do with this overreach of policing power. These things are not constitutional. We have a good constitution, and we better pay attention to it if we're going to save this nation. If we're going to find happiness and prosperity, we better pay attention to the United States Constitution. As I've studied it, I have a testimony of the United States Constitution being the answer and to solve our problems here in America.
Well, that's why you are one of the great people, frankly, in our nation's history, Cliven. I want to thank you for what you've done. Thank you to your family, your sons, your wife, Carol, everybody. We owe you a great debt of gratitude, and God bless you. May the Heavenly Father keep you well.
Thank you.
Let me conclude this verdict section by saying to the American people, and I've just written a book, the situation with Cliven and what happened is in that book, among many other situations, where we have a system of justice which does not represent the American people. We have a deep state in the executive branch. It's out of control. You can see even President Trump can't control it. It's been used against him. We have court jesters up on Capitol Hill that do little to nothing other than to feather their own nest with money and power. They go on either Fox News, MSNBC, or CNN to promote themselves, but don't take care of the American people. And we have federal judges, and in this case, the judge was forced to act because she literally had her neck on the chopping block supporting these prosecutors. And it was when it was revealed just how corrupt and criminal they were, she had to throw them overboard along with the case. But the reality here is, as Jefferson said, and this is what I discuss and analyze in my new book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, is that federal judges who are unelected and who think they're there for life, they're not really there for life, they're there for good behavior, and who were given immunity, if you can believe this, by the U.S. Supreme Court, gave it to themselves, their justices, and lower court judges, without any legal authority, I might add, is that they think they're above the law and they act as if they're above the law and they don't protect us. And if we had had federal judges that would have protected Cliven and his family, all of this never would have happened. We wouldn't have had to go through all these years of litigation, of criminal prosecution, of being thrown in prison, for Larry Klayman having to fight my way into the case and dealing with a lot of abuse, from leftist judges in the process. Because our judges, in principle, are our most important public servants. But in practice, they have become tyrants in robes. And that's what Jefferson predicted. He said they would become despots. And someday, when things got bad enough, Jefferson said we'd have to shed the blood of patriots yet again in a second American Revolution. I'm trying to avoid that. Cliven's trying to avoid that. My clients are trying to avoid that. We don't want to see that. We want peaceful and legal change. So I want you to read this book. It's not like any book you've ever read. You can order it, pre-order it on Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com or other websites right now. It'll soon be in the bookstores. The date of publication is October 27th, but I'm trying to get it pushed up so you'll have it well in advance. But it's very important to read it because it's Klayman's manifesto. Okay, it's not a communist manifesto. It's Klayman's manifesto. And what I believe in. And what I believe in is what Cliven believes in and what the American people believe in. Individual rights, individual liberties, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without having a tyrannical government, as occurred in the years leading up to 1776, try to control our lives. So go get that book and share this radio show far and wide. You can find it at radioamerica.com, at freedomwatchusa.com, on Parler, the new Twitter, on Facebook, on Amazon Fire, on Roku, on iTunes, and pray that our country will be saved. God bless you. God bless your family. God save America. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, thank you for listening to me.